Yo, 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 yo. This is episode 100 of Mouth Dancing with your host, Young. Welcome. Thanks for listening to another episode. The 100th episode, in fact. It's a big deal. That's like a landmark episode. Not sure what kind of landmark. You know, anything could be a landmark, basically, like a mountain or a tree or a river or a rock. I'd like to think it's a really beautiful and memorable landmark. You know? A beautiful old tree, for instance. Or a waterfall. I was thinking the other day, or actually last night when I was kind of half asleep, about wearing a full bodysuit that's like skin tight and it's the same color as your skin, and it totally conforms to like every curve of your body. It's basically like, I don't know, like a leotard or spandex or something like that, a unitard, and it's the same color as your flesh. Would that be illegal to wear around? Because you would pretty much, it would be like, visually you'd look like you're naked, right? Because it would even like show your junk and everything, and just, it would look pretty much like you're naked since it's the same color as your skin. But you're fully covered still. If you wore something like that around, would that be illegal? Like, could you get in trouble for that? I mean, I bet a lot of people wouldn't even know that you were wearing something. They'd think, oh, that person's naked, what the hell? And they'd probably report you to the police. And then if the cops come, and you're like, hey, look, I'm actually wearing something, and you show them that it's actually like a full body suit, and like, it's just skin colored, so some people think I'm naked, but I'm not. I mean, would that be considered indecent, like, exposure or lewd or something like that? Wonder if there's been a case like that. Like, if there were, it would probably go to court and there would have to be some sort of precedent made, like, is this allowed? I don't know. Maybe we need to make some sort of a city ordinance about this, because our ordinance doesn't cover, you know, wearing a unitard that's the same color as your flesh. It covers all kinds of other things, but not this particular instance. Or this particular case, you know. I don't know why I had that thought. I was kind of half asleep and I was like, oh, I should talk about that on the podcast. But it's kind of a weird thought, isn't it? Like, I really wonder, like, I truly am curious, is that illegal or not? Because it would look pretty weird. I wouldn't want to see someone dressed like that. Personally, I wouldn't like it. You know, even if they're wearing something, I wouldn't like it. Maybe I'm prudish. I don't know. I just don't like seeing strangers naked, generally speaking. You know? Unless they're very attractive, I guess. Even then, I don't really care. I mean, I don't want to see that. That's their business, right? They should keep that in their home. And yeah, but that gets into some legally questionable territory, doesn't it? I think it's quite debatable. So think about it. And maybe ask your friends. And maybe someone who's a lawyer. I was thinking of this crazy hypothetical scenario in which America gets into a civil war again, right? Like it's the second civil war. It's not between the North and the South this time, technically. It's not like Yanks versus Confederates. It's more like people are just really divided about politics and things. And there's a civil war happening. People just all over the country are fighting. The US government is kind of in chaos. And the American people, after fighting for a while, they decide to establish a new government, right? And they're going to overthrow the current government. But then just at that moment, as they're about to make their new government, China decides to intervene, right? So they send over their military, and their military is fighting with the people who are rebels against this new government that's forming. And with China's help, this rebel army who's against the new government is able to push the new American government people all the way up to like close to Canada, right? And then Canada decides to get involved at this point because they're like, oh, we don't want this to happen. We're supporting the independent new government of America because that's the people's will. So Canada gets involved. Canadian Army and the independent Americans, they push the side with the Chinese support all the way back down to like towards the middle of America, back south. So then they have control of the north part, and then the southern part is under the control of the rebels and the Chinese army. And then the Chinese army, or the government, and the rebels at this point, they make a proposal to the other side. They say, let's just divide America right in half, right down the middle. Not vertically, but horizontally, like west to east. So you guys get the north part, and we get the south part. And then afterwards, the southern part, it's got a lot of Chinese influence and support. They become really rich. And with the Chinese propaganda constantly coming in, saying the north part is bad, that's where they have dictators, and they're inhumane. And they decide to sanction the north for not going along with what the south wants. So then the north becomes really poor and destitute and desperate, and they become a little paranoid, right? They start getting nukes and things to protect themselves from the south, which is increasingly aggressive, and the people are just wound up on all kinds of pro-China propaganda that says the north part is just evil. Now imagine that scenario unfolding in America. Okay, and also, yeah, China's got military bases now in the southern part of the country. Now you imagine that scenario and you think to yourself, which part is the real America? Is it the northern part or the southern part? I would probably have to agree with the northern part being representative of true Americans more than the southern part. And if you've been paying attention and you understand what's going on here, you could draw a real parallel to what happened in Korea, actually. That's pretty much exactly what happened in Korea during the Korean War. Except that South Korea was backed by America and North Korea was backed by China and Russia. Or the Soviet Union, actually. That's the only difference, really. So now, with that hypothetical scenario in your mind of America, does that change your view of Korea at all? Do you now see Korea differently? And finally, in this episode, I wanted to talk about pollen. It's kind of wild how plants and trees, they just jizz all over everything in the spring, right? Or even starting in like late winter, they just kind of jizz all over everything, spreading their seed everywhere. And it's perfectly legal. No one bats an eye at it. It's nature, right? It's okay because it's nature. Trees and plants are doing it. It's nature, so no one says anything about it. But if a human were to do that, that would be like illegal for sure. Probably be considered sexual assault, probably. Or indecent exposure. Something like that. I'm not sure exactly what law or ordinance it would be violating, but it would for sure be not legit. Now you think, why is it okay for plants and trees to do that? Is it because they can't help it? They're not sentient beings? I don't know, some might argue that they are. Because they move, they grow, they react to the environment. Where do you draw the line? Can they be held accountable for their actions? I don't know. They're kind of slaves to humanity at this point. We just do with them what we will. We chop them down, we grow them, and then eat them. You know, we burn them. We chop them up in like wood chippers, turn them into fertilizer or bark. We make furniture and houses out of them, and we smoke them, and we use them to make baskets and things like that. Maybe it's because they're so downtrodden and oppressed by humanity, we just let it go, that they're kind of gross in the springtime and horny and jizzing everywhere. We just let it go because we feel sorry for them, maybe. Or because they're so good looking, we just let it go. That's like, what do you call that? It's like pretty privilege, right? They're privileged because they look good. They get away with shit that others don't. That's another thing that I was just contemplating recently, and something that maybe all of us should consider. Should we just let it go? I don't know if there was much we could even do about it, actually. I mean, how would you stop it, right? Maybe we just have to accept it, that that's part of reality and life. Some things get to be more natural than others. Humans, we don't get to be as natural as we want because of the legal system and the laws we've created and societal expectations, basically. So yeah, there's that. Just think about that. Think about all the things I talked about in this episode, because they're important. And I want to thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.